to Pictures on the Scorecard. My name is Seth McWhorter. I'm a graphic designer and branding professional in the golf industry, and as always, I am joined by Robby Woodard, founder of Best Ball Media, co-founder of Best Ball Media. I always say that. But tonight we're gonna kind of turn things around a little bit, and on this show we're gonna be talking a lot about golf logos, creativity in golf, all those things, and I think that it might be kind of interesting to dive into the process, the creative process that you have to go through to get to anything, whether it's a logo, whether it's a video. I mean, we talked to Trey Wren in the last episode and got to hear a little bit about his process of how he tells stories around the game of golf and talks about courses and all that kind of stuff. But there is a certain level of a creative process that has to take place with anything. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Robby, you may ask me some questions about my work and how I handle things and approach things, but this will be a kind of freewheeling, just casual conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the creative side of golf is fascinating to me. I want to say being on the outside of it or being on this side of it. So I thought, we'd kind of look at the work you've done. We had you on the Whole Story podcast I guess last summer, so we're getting probably 9-10 months away from that. Go back and listen to that episode. Maybe you'll hear some of the same stories or whatever, but I thought it'd be good to, you've got McWhorter Creative, a graphic design firm, creative firm. You've done a lot of work for some great brands and logos and courses out there. So if you would, why don't you just start with, give us a summary of what McWhorter Creative is and does.
Yeah, so for the past 5 years, I have been a single person. I say a one-man studio, creative studio, and I think I do that because I don't want to say, hey, I only do logos or I only do this. I do quite a bit of different types of design work. But yeah, 2019 is when I broke off and kind of went out on my own. Before that, I was in the advertising industry. I was at an ad agency in Atlanta. And I was actually an art director, which is a slightly different skill set. If you've seen Mad Men, it's, the setup of an ad agency is actually shockingly about the same if you take away, and I think I made this joke on the Whole Story podcast, but if you take away all the, sexism and drinking constantly, the structure of an ad agency is pretty similar to what's depicted there, where you have teams of art directors and copywriters working together. But at its core, in the creative sort of department of any agency, there's a process that takes place to get to an end product. And so when I started McWhorter Creative, I had this background in advertising, but I carried over a lot of the thinking that happens in the advertising world and in the marketing world, where it starts with research and learning about clients and learning about the problem, trying to identify what the problem is before you even start putting pen to paper and drawing and sketching or writing, whatever it might be. But yeah, so all that to say, 2019 is when I started McWhorter Creative, and over the past 5 years, it's gone from I would do anything that I needed to, whether it be freelancing for ad agencies or commercial illustration. But now, probably 90% of what I do is golf related, and even within the golf world, there are tons of different things that I do. Logos are kind of front and center in what I share, but I also do a ton of different things like a little bit of marketing and consulting on that stuff. But yeah, I don't, it's kind of like I'm terrible at answering that question because I just, it's like my brain just goes a million different directions on kind of what I get asked to do day to day.
Yeah. Well, I know you mentioned before one of your first people or groups you asked to, hey, can I help you or can I do something, was the No Laying Up crew. And so I was going to ask, like, maybe who you've worked for in the golf space. Like you mentioned, there's so many different avenues, from brands like a No Laying Up to businesses that are in the golf space to courses. So kind of take us through some of the designs that we might have seen out there in the wild.
Yeah, well, the very first official golf project that I got assigned was through the guys at No Laying Up, and at the time, this was 2018. They had released a couple videos on YouTube, and I was immediately I had not come across them before, and I was just sort of taken aback by their approach to golf and content. It felt so natural, and it felt very authentic to the way that I interacted with golf, where it wasn't this sort of like untouchable thing that you couldn't, you couldn't critique, you couldn't interact with. It was like this holy game almost. And they were so irreverent and fun that I reached out to them on a whim late one night and was like, hey, this is what I do. You don't know me, but is there anything you guys need from a design, from a creative standpoint? And I got a response back pretty quick, and they're like, hey, we actually have the Ryder Cup coming up, and we're going to do a little bit of, merchandise. Can you come up with a spin on our logo that incorporates Ryder Cup themes? And so we did a Team Euro and a Team USA design, and they put it on hats and t-shirts, and that was kind of like the first project I had in the golf industry. They very quickly sort of hooked me up with Zach Blair. At the time, Zach Blair had just sort of gotten the Buck Club off the ground, at least on Instagram, and was doing little projects here and there, whether putting this logo that he designed. I didn't design the Buck Club logo. That's all Zach. He's extremely creative, and he's an artist in his own right. Yeah, I mean, he was selling stuff, but he needed help drawing and kind of taking some of his ideas and fleshing them out and putting them on products. And so starting with those two groups is really kind of my sort of foot in the door in the golf industry. And since then, I've had the privilege of working with resorts, Pinehurst, Stream Song, all the way to, private clubs and new construction. We had, like I said, we had Trey Wren on last time, and he's very involved with High Point up in Michigan, and then had some international work with Spey Bay, which is the Lynx Dow or Lynx Golf guys. But yeah, it's been a I've ridden the golf wave. I've rode the golf wave over the past 4 years and 5 years, and it's been incredible to kind of find a way to use my talents and in a industry and game that I love.
You mentioned the Pinehurst, and I thought that was one of the cool stories you shared with us before. You did the logo for number 8, and when you look at it, it's like, man, that's a really cool logo, but there's kind of some deeper meanings behind that. Why don't you share that story?
Yeah, I told this the other day to someone, because it is kind of like it's pinch myself because I got to work with Pinehurst, but it's also a little bit humbling because it just shows you that sometimes what you see in a logo is not what everybody else sees. So I got the assignment from Tom Pashley at Pinehurst, who's the president of the resort, and I was so nervous, but they brought me in. They said, all right, we need to revamp we need to give Pinehurst number 8 a new logo. They're gonna renovate the course, and I got that assignment, and I did a little research, and it's their centennial course. So it was built in 95, I believe, which is 100 years after the resort opened in 1895. And so there's some history around it being the 100-year, built on the 100-year anniversary. Obviously, with Pinehurst, they have the numbering system with their courses, so it needed to feature number 8 in some way. And I started just kind of sketching, the number 8, and then I kind of I think I drew a line under something kind of haphazardly, and I could make up a story. It probably wouldn't be true, but I drew it on a Post-it note and I turned it sideways, and I was like, oh, if a line under the number 8 is 100, and so I kind of put that in the computer, cleaned it up, and put a whole presentation together and shot it off to the client. And I get a call, I don't know how long, maybe a day later, and it's from Tom Pashley at Pinehurst. And he says, Seth, he's very nice, and he's like, Seth, this stuff, I mean, like, it's kind of cool. I mean, kind of mailed it in a little bit. And I was like, oh my gosh, I mean, I'm sure I turned just white. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he was like, well, give us some more time with this stuff. And so I think maybe an hour went by, and he called me back, and he was like, you know what? Whoever I was showing this work to came over, and they were like, oh, look at that. It's 100 for the Centennial course. And he called me back, and he was like, you know what? I think we're on the right track. This is exactly what we need to be doing. I love this idea. And that probably makes Tom sound like he's just, but no, it's just one of those things where, like, if you don't look at it the way I'm looking at it in the moment, or if I don't present it in the right way, then maybe it doesn't click immediately. But yeah, that's actually it's a good kind of example of I have to take ideas that can be somewhat abstract and find ways to present them and sort of toe the line between being obvious with something and being interesting and abstract. So yeah, that's a fun one, and now it's something I'm very proud of, and I'm excited to see out in the world.
Yeah, that was one. I didn't see it. I didn't know it was their Centennial course.
That's great.
But when you show it, when you mention it, and obviously it jumps out, and it's like, oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Right. So, all right. So you mentioned taking concepts and ideas from people or what they want to do. Take us through the process. Course, business, brand. Somebody comes to you and says, we need a brand. We need a logo. Can you walk us through kind of start to finish what that looks like?
Yeah. I'll use the example of a new golf course, because that's kind of something that I think we'll talk a lot about in future episodes, hopefully, of new logos that come about. And it's a very interesting process, to me at least. But the logistics of it is I get a lot of my business through Instagram. And what I figured out pretty early on when I went on my own is that you get asked to do what you show. So if you show a bunch of sketches of golfers, if you look back on my Instagram, I have these animations, these animated swings, and they're just like 8-frame animations of famous, the greatest golfers of all time and their swings. And I got asked to do that a lot, like right off the bat. They're like, we saw this, we want you to do that. But anyway, when I started doing a couple of sort of logo-based projects, I started getting a lot of questions about, hey, do you design logos? And when a person reaches out, whatever it is, immediately I have to ask 50 questions. And it usually starts with them as like, hey, it's even the most professional people are like, me need logo, you help ? And so immediately I launch into what is this? Tell me more. and so it took me a while to figure out how to navigate that process with someone, but people are if they're not used to working with a designer or anybody creative in the marketing industry, it's like they don't really know what that person needs to do their job. And so the first part of the process is me asking a ton of questions. And then I like to, once I kind of have that information from their point of view, I try to dig in and start to unearth what's interesting to me about the business, the course. Let's kind of keep it on the course. But like, let's say it's a new build. What was the property before that? Who's involved? Is the area known for something? Is the landscape known? Is it iconic for this reason? And then once you kind of combine what I learn, what I know, inevitably more questions come up, and then I get to go back to the client and say, well, what have you thought about this? Sometimes clients come to me and they've already done a lot of that work, and they kind of know what they want. They're like, this used to be a dairy farm. It needs to have a cow in it. That's the logo needs to be a cow. But once I have all that information and we've kind of gotten aligned, I sort of pick a handful of themes that have risen to the top of that conversation, and I start to pursue those things visually. So, we start to flesh out different concepts, and then I present those to a client. And I say this every time when someone asks me, like, how long does this process take? I mean, it takes as long as it takes. But once we have that first round of concepts where we actually have initial designs, things really jump off because immediately clients start to go, oh, that's really interesting. I don't like what's going on here, but like, what if you combine these two? And then you just sort of, it's rinse and repeat. You do that 3 or 4 times. And hopefully by the end of that process, you have a final design and a final concept that you are putting finishing touches on and doing all the detail work. And then it becomes kind of like, all right, have I given them all the actual files that they need to turn around and order that new logo on Holderness and Bourne and Peter Millar and Imperial and all put it on hats and shirts and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's a process that like I borrowed from advertising and how we would get a brief, we would get an assignment from a client, and it's, there'd be a team of strategy people that are kind of analyzing it and figuring out what the true problem is. And then they'd put it in a brief and they'd give it to the creative, the creative department. And then we would take that information and we'd be off to the races, hopefully. But I kind of have to serve all those roles when I'm on my own. And so I very quickly had to realize that you have to be good at asking the right questions, getting the right information, getting aligned before you spend untold amount of hours, crafting something that the client's never going to buy. It's a process that I still continuously, project to project, I change and adapt however it needs to.
So you mentioned new build, right? We'll go with that one still. You look at kind of what the property might have been before, what might be some unique things about the property. Where else do you find inspiration? Maybe not just for new builds, but for other things. I mean, you see different logos. They have animals. They have, building structures or lots of different letters, lots of different things. So where do you find the inspiration for kind of the direction you want to take something?
Yeah. So, it can come from literally anywhere, and that's kind of cliche and like hokey to say. But when I get stuck, and I get stuck, on a daily basis, where you start looking at something and you're like, I don't know where to go from here, and either you have to work on something else, which I'm very fortunate that I have plenty of work to do, and so if I get stuck on something, it's like, no, I'm just gonna go work on this other thing. Recently, I have a stack. I'm looking over here because I have a stack of 30 old golf digests and golf magazines, and they're all from the 60s and 70s, and it's a treasure trove of graphic, just inspiration. And it kind of, I have some new golf digests, and this is not a knock on Golf Digest or anybody, but I have some new stuff, and it's like, everything just feels a little bit just kind of boring. I mean, I'll say it. And you look at an old Golf Digest and and it was mostly ads for golf knickknacks and random stuff, but all of the advertisements and then the art and the typography and everything is just interesting, and a lot of it's hand drawn because it wasn't easy to kind of reproduce photos and get a hold of them and all that kind of stuff, and so a lot of it's really fun, cartoony, playful things where a designer or the art director at Golf Digest was like, well, we don't have a picture of that. Let's pay a cartoonist to draw it. And it's always funny, interesting. So that's one way where it's you can instantly get inspired and distracted by looking at those things. And then honestly, Pinterest. It's funny. I think of my mom making a new recipe or something, or somebody crafting something from a Pinterest post. But a ton of my sort of inspiration library comes from Pinterest and kind of just compiling things. And I think the best stuff that I get to do is inspired by things that have nothing to do with golf. And I think that's what kind of drives a lot of new looks and new ideas in golf is you're starting to see from a fashion standpoint, you're starting to see streetwear come into golf. And obviously, there's a lot about that, but yeah, it's fun to bring stuff from outside in and introduce new ideas to the sort of visual language.
So you're very good at what you do. Who are some of the others in the market that are doing this well, that you like and respect?
Yeah, well, it's funny, like a lot of people say like, oh, you can't be that many people that do what you do, and maybe in the grand scheme there are not, but there are several people doing really great stuff, and there are a few that we've talked about, like, man, we'd love to have them come on and talk. One of the first groups that does creative work, and I didn't realize they did design work, and maybe they don't want me advertising it, but the Sugarloaf Social guys, they're obviously known for a lot of things, but they have their own merchandise and design their own stuff, and they're, in my opinion, one of the first groups to really bring in outside design influence into the golf space. So they also dabble in branding and more than dabble. That's probably not fair, but like they do great stuff. And I think that I don't think any of those guys have like the same background as I do, but they clearly have the same process and thinking behind everything that they do. So I really respect their work. They do great stuff. They were, I believe, behind the latest Pinehurst number 10 stuff, and you can tell like it's just like well thought out, really creative work. Lee Wybransky is a renowned artist in the golf space. All the work he's done with the USGA and these major tournaments where he does these limited, beautiful paintings that are limited edition prints and stuff like that. He also does some really cool logo work. And has been doing it for a long time. He's got some iconic stuff, out in the world. Yeah, so there's so many people that are doing incredible work, and a lot of them are kind of sort of just getting started and starting to get a lot of following, which is great. Maria with Sometimes Draws is really talented and does some great illustration. She's done some logo work and stuff like that. And then Ground Under Repair, which is Kate Smith and Shane Bacon. Kate's actually a Epson Tour player and an incredible golfer. Obviously, trying to make a living doing that, but she's also a really talented designer and illustrator, and is doing some really fun stuff. So while it may seem like it's just a handful of people, there's tons of people with this type of talent that are bringing new stuff to the game, and I think that's great, and it's been fun to see over the past 4 or 5 years more and more people get into the business. Well,
I think you do well. I mean, a couple of you didn't mention, you've done a lot of stuff for the Sweetens Cove folks, and really cool stuff for them. Tree Farm, obviously one. You mentioned Zach Blair earlier. The Tree Farm logos are incredible. Incorporates it being an old tree farm. Here in South Carolina, you blended the South Carolina flag in there perfectly. So I thought that was a great logo, great course as well. So well done. Check out McWhorterCreative.com. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I will say this, and we can kind of start to wind things down a little bit. But I was talking to a client the other day, and he kind of had the mic drop on me. He was like, if this course sucks, if nobody likes this course, then the logo, it could be the greatest logo in the world, nobody would care. And I'd like to disagree with that a little bit, but I think it's pretty true with a lot of these things. And I've been so lucky to work with a ton of great courses and brands, but there's a little bit of that too. You could have the best course in the world, and pretty much anything is your logo. But yeah, no, it's really cool to be in this industry doing what I do, and I'm excited to see how things start to evolve and things change as the game changes.
Well, I appreciate you sharing a little bit about your process. You do great work. But I thought maybe now we jump into what we normally do towards the end, our routine par segment, and I'll let you kick that off.
Yeah, well, I think we're recording this Sunday of the Heritage and the Chevron Championship, and Nelly Korda just clinched her fifth win and her fifth start in a row, and that's insane. I was in the car with my 2.5-year-old and 4-year-old daughter. And I was talking to my wife, and I made a reminder. This is early this morning and Sunday. And I was like, watch women's golf. And I was trying to hype Nelly Corda up to my 4-year-old, and she was kind of like just playing along, whatever. But I did make her, But I got her to watch a little bit of it, and I think with her and obviously with what Scotty's been doing, it's pretty neat to see. I think we're all kind of, somewhat ignoring the gravity of what the greatness that we're witnessing. So Nelly getting her fifth. The Heritage is going to be a Monday finish. So he's got a 5-shot lead, I think, as we're recording this.
Something like that.
Yeah, so I'd put a lot of money on him, clinching that with like 4 or 5 holes to go. But yeah, we had to mention those two because those are just, they're dominating the sport, and Nelly especially is just incredible to watch. And I hope it continues to get more eyeballs in the women's game, because they are incredibly talented.
Yeah, two well-deserving players, well-deserving number one players in both their men's and women's game. And they are a lot of fun to watch. So I'm excited about what they're doing. So one of the things I wanted to share was I saw that Golf Digest is about to release their Every Hole at a Hoopy match play. And I haven't gotten a chance to play it. I believe you have played it. Is that right?
I have not.
No. Okay.
Nah. I've been to Vidalia. I've worked with a course in Vidalia, but I hadn't played it.
Yeah. Well, if you haven't, go to the Golf Digest. They're about to release their Every Hole flyover, so that'll get you. But just a cool concept of it's a match play course, right? Like, who cares what the scorecard says? You got to beat the guy you're playing against. So, really cool thing that they've done there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll kind of round it out with one of the many storylines of this year's Masters was the fashion. And we did an episode 2 episodes ago talking about the history of the Masters, and we talked a lot about merchandising and all that kind of stuff. But Jason Day with the Malbon, we even mentioned earlier about streetwear and different just all kinds of influences coming into the game, and I think we caught a little bit of a new wave of fashion that can ruffled some feathers and also made a lot of people happy. But him, what do you think of the Malbon fit? He looked like he was going to blow away on Friday. Like I think he was going to catch a thermal and just fly away.
You talk about fashion like nothing's new, right? Everything's kind of a recycled thing. So like the baggy pants are back. Tiger had those in 97. They weren't the exact same, but you think about fashion, you think about Payne Stewart, right? Like what he wore at the Masters, it's just it's one of those things that be creative.
Yeah,
and I guess there's certain places, maybe Augusta, you just there's lines, kind of invisible lines you just don't cross, and I don't know. It's their place; they can call it, and I think respectfully he said, "All right, I'll take it off."
Yeah, he did a great job of sort of diffusing the situation. It's like, yeah, you know what? Like they asked me, and I respect this place, and I'm gonna take it off. But I think it was fun to sort of because I guess come Sunday, Scotty was kind of closing things down. It was fun to just kind of jump on Twitter and Instagram and see what people think, because there's no shortage of opinions about what he was wearing. And again, I mostly didn't like it because I just know I couldn't pull that off. But like my 7th grade wardrobe was probably pretty close in terms of pleats and baggy stuff.
Yeah. So you got a chance to go, correct?
Yeah. We went. I went down early Saturday morning and had a great day Saturday. It was still cool. It got real comfortable in the afternoon, but it was still a bit of breeze from that brutal day on Friday. And then we went early Sunday morning and caught a little bit of golf, but then we hit the road halfway through the day and caught the last 6 or 7 holes on TV. But that place, it's you pinch yourself every time you get out there, and it lives up to it every year.
It does indeed. Till next time, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're always sitting on go if anybody wants to take us to Augusta next year. Well, that was fun. I know that was a little bit of a different episode, and I think from time to time we will have just kind of conversations amongst ourselves, and hopefully you found them interesting. But yeah, as always, I say it every time, I can't believe this podcast exists. We're talking about design and logos and creativity in golf, and it's awesome to me, and I hope that you've enjoyed it as well. From Robbie and I hope you enjoyed the show and join us for the next round of Pictures on the Scorecard.